Oh, Robert, I can't get my pants on. You did this to me.
My mom screamed at my dad.
Belinda, honey, you're exaggerating. You gave birth 5 years ago. It's not my fault you're still fat.
How dare you talk to me like that? You're sleeping on the couch for the week.
Great, you take up too much space on the bed anyway. Come on, Kara. You can sleep in the living room too and we can make pillow forts. It's gonna be so much fun.
My dad laughed and smiled at me. Before I continue to tell you about my very strange life, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell in the next 5 seconds for 1 week of good luck. It really works. Since I was a little girl, it was a really hard task living with my mom. In fact, it was sort of like a punishment. I always wondered why I couldn't have a loving, ordinary mom who wasn't so obsessed with how she looked all the time. My mom was actually pretty normal in size, but she felt like her body never went back to normal after she had me. After that horrible experience, she said she would never have another child again. One had done enough damage to her body. As I grew up, I began to realize that not only was my mom ashamed of her body, she was also jealous of mine. It made no sense, because I was only about 6 years old. Whenever we'd go shopping for new clothes and I'd try them on in the changing room, she'd look like she wanted to cry.
Wow, that swimsuit looks so good on you. Enjoy it while it lasts. I don't look good in swimsuits anymore.
I'm sure you do, Mommy.
Be quiet.
She'd shout, and everyone would look at her like she was completely nuts. When I tried on dresses, pants, shirts, or shoes, she looked like something heavy just dropped on her head and ruined her life forever. Sometimes when we went out, like to her friends' parties, she'd make me wear the most hideous outfits, hoping that she'd get more compliments than me. She never did, though. Everyone thought I was so cute. They'd pull my cheeks, smile at me, and sometimes even give me gifts.
I don't know why you keep dressing her in these ugly clothes. I think I should take over.
My dad said one night. Well, you guessed it. He was on the couch for another week. As time went by, my mom's obsession with her body transferred to me. I started to feel body conscious and I was convinced that I had to be skinny. I didn't enjoy kids' parties and other things that kids usually did because I skipped the ice cream, cotton candy, and hot dogs. I think I was about 10 years old when I realized that my life was sad. My mom was so mean to me, and my dad, although he was very nice to me, did nothing to defend me. It's like he was scared of her or something. Then one night I heard my mom say something to him, which terrified me.
Soon Kara is going to go through puberty, and that's gonna be great for me.
Why?
Acne, skin problems, she'll look awful, and I'll finally be the prettier one. I'll get all the compliments. She'll gain weight too, and I'll make sure I bring home some fast food at least 4 nights a week.
That's really immature, Belinda. No mother should be competing with her daughter like that. If anything, you should be helping and supporting her. She didn't choose to be born beautiful.
After that comment, she screamed at him and he was on the couch again. I was scared because I'd never thought that puberty would ruin my flawless skin. I started doing some research and realized that if I had a clean diet and drank lots of water, my skin would glow. Often, teenagers broke out because they ate too much junk food. I'll never, ever eat junk food, I thought to myself. My mom started pretending she was giving me gifts when she'd come home on evenings with piles of fast food.
Look, Kara, all this yummy stuff. These French fries smell so good,
she'd say. They definitely smelled good, and often I was tempted to eat them all, but I'd always say that I'd already eaten. After she left the room, I threw all the junk food into the trash and ate salad and fruits. I also learned how to have a good skincare routine before I became a teenager. I used natural oils and refused to use any makeup or chemicals. By the time I was 15, I was a goddess. My skin was glowing and I had no pimples or acne. I'd also maintained a pretty healthy-looking figure, and my mom hadn't figured out my very simple secret, that I just ate clean, exercised, and took care of my skin. I think her jealousy increased when I started to look like an adult. I was growing after all. She started to be extremely mean to me in many different ways. One summer, we decided to take a camping trip. My mom, dad, and I all had different tents, and we set them up at a really nice camping site. I remember the beautiful sounds of nature there, and how I felt so at peace for the first few days. Then one night, while I was having a beautiful dream about swimming in a stream, I felt someone grab my leg through my tent and drag me outside. Someone else threw a bag over my head and I was carried off somewhere. When they removed the bag from my head, I looked around. I was in a little cabin and there were 2 men dressed in black. They told me that I was kidnapped and my family would have to pay a huge ransom if they wanted me back. I was horrified and I was kept in that room for 2 days. Then one day, I heard some footsteps outside, and I heard my mom's voice.
I think that's enough time. Thanks, guys. You can let her go now.
I couldn't believe it. My mom had planned my entire kidnapping just to freak me out. When they finally released me and took me back to my parents, I was furious, especially with my dad. You're a terrible father. How could you let her do this to me? You're even worse than her for allowing this.
I didn't know, darling. She told me you'd met a friend and that you all had gone to stay at another camping site. Then I heard her speaking on the phone and realized that she lied to me. I'm the one who demanded that she ask them to release you.
Why didn't you call the police and have her arrested? You're a pathetic dad. You just let this crazy woman do whatever she wants. That night, we packed up and went home. My mom looked satisfied with herself. I felt like going to the police that evening, but my dad convinced me that my mom probably had a mental problem and that we should not be too hard on her. I could have tried to forgive her, but do you know what she did to me next? I came home from school one afternoon and I couldn't find my dogs anywhere. I forgot to mention that I'm a huge pet lover, and when I was 7, my dad got me 2 beautiful golden retrievers. They used to follow me everywhere, and I talked to them when I had no one to talk to. Mom, where are the dogs? I asked.
I sent them to the pound. They're annoying. They bark too much.
You what?
I didn't think it would be an issue. Besides, you're too beautiful to care about animals.
She replied mockingly. I got on my bicycle and I sped to the dog pound, but by the time I got there, my dogs had already been given to their new owners. They refused to give me any information about them, so I had lost them forever. I was totally devastated and went home crying. My dad noticed how sad I was and went out and got me a kitten. But if you know what it's like to lose a pet, you know that you simply can't replace it. I tried to distract myself by doing other things. I started dating a wonderful guy named Marlin, and we did lots of fun things together. I was able to persuade him to start eating healthier too. And we even joined a gym. So we were like fitness buddies and avoided the unhealthy things that teenagers usually did, like drinking alcohol and eating huge amounts of junk food. One day, he suggested that I start a YouTube channel to share my beauty secrets. I took his advice because it would be another way to get my mind off my horrible mother. So I shared my secrets, that the key to having a healthy body and beautiful skin is simply to eat right, be active, and use natural products on your face. I was finally having a happy life, until my mom found out about Marlin and decided to try to ruin that too. She asked me to invite him home for dinner so that she could meet him. I glanced at my dad to see if he thought it was a good idea, and he nodded. He assured me that he'd try to make sure she behaved normally. So I invited him, and of course, it was one of the weirdest nights of my life.
So, Marlin, are you only my daughter's boyfriend because she's pretty?
My mom asked.
No, ma'am. She also has a wonderful personality.
He replied and winked at me.
Her? Are we talking about the same person?
Definitely.
Do you know that sometimes she doesn't flush the toilet? Oh my gosh, she smells really bad sometimes. You should smell her feet after she's been out all day. My daughter is gross. And clearly, you have no standards.
Mom! I was so embarrassed. I got up from the table and ran up to my room. Later, my dad came up and tried to comfort me. You told me she'd be normal, I cried.
I'm sorry, dear. I didn't know she'd say these things. I spoke to her before, yet she still did that. I'm so sorry. Anyway, don't worry. I drove Marlin home, and I'm not talking to your mom for the rest of the night.
The next day, I was embarrassed around Marlin, but he acted like nothing had happened. He was the best. We had a lovely day, and I even compromised my healthy eating standards and had ice cream, but I had no idea what was in store for me next. When I got home, there was nothing but junk food. On the table, in the fridge, everywhere. Mom, where's all the healthy stuff? I said.
I found out about your little YouTube channel and your so-called secret. You thought you could outsmart me and become more beautiful? Well, you're not allowed to eat any of that healthy stuff anymore. From now on, all we'll have in this house is junk food. Well, I'm going to follow your tips and eat healthy at restaurants, but you'll have to settle for what we have in here.
Dad, are you seriously letting her get away with this? I screamed. He just nodded his head and looked at the floor. At that point, I'd had enough of both of them. I went to my room, packed a bag, and walked out of the door. I went to Marlon's house and asked him to hide me in his room. I stayed there for 2 days, then he got scared his parents would be accused of kidnapping, even though they didn't know I was there. He asked me to go somewhere else, but I had nowhere else to go. He gave me some money and I took a train to another city. I walked around, slept on the streets, and had an awful life until I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to return home to see if anything had changed. As soon as I got off the train in my hometown, there was a big crowd and a camera shining in my face. Then a news reporter shoved a microphone in front of my mouth.
Are you aware that you've been all over the news for the past few days?
The reporter said. No, my parents bothered to look for me?
Well, your father did. He's right here.
At that moment, I saw my father pushing through the crowd.
Darling, I thought I'd lost you forever. I'm so sorry for what happened. You've been the perfect daughter, and I'm sorry I gave you such a horrible mother. We're getting a divorce, and I'll file for full custody of you. We will never have to be near her again.
Really, Dad?
Yes.
What made you come to your senses?
If I had to choose between the two of you, I'd choose you. You're my baby girl. I made you. And my wife, well, I think she belongs in an asylum, and hopefully the court will send her there.
I jumped into my father's arms and hugged him very tightly. From that day on, we have been inseparable. I haven't seen my mother in a long time, and my life has improved. She taught me what I should never be like, and when I have daughters someday, I will make sure I treat them like princesses.
I threw my backpack over my shoulder as I said goodbye to my friends. Another great day at school. Now I just had to find my brother so we could go home. I was starving because I had given my lunch money to a kid who forgot his. I figured that act of kindness would feel much better than buying food for myself, and it sure was. I spotted my brother leaning against the car we shared. A cute girl approached him smiling, but he said something and she looked like she'd seen a ghost. I figured she mistook him for me. We're identical twins after all. Hey there, remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more. It only takes a second and we really appreciate it. As soon as we got home, I went to the kitchen to say hi to my parents, while my brother Evan went up to his room as always. It smells fantastic. Did you guys make pizza from scratch? I asked my mom as soon as the amazing aroma filled my nose. I hugged her and did my special handshake with my dad. I then set the table and called my brother down to come eat.
So, how was school? Levi? Evan?
My dad asked me and my brother. I started telling them about my classes that day, but my dad kept looking at Evan.
Evan, I asked you about your school day,
said my dad sternly.
What are you nagging me for? That's supposed to be Mom's job,
replied my brother. My dad instantly looked annoyed. Evan just knew how to push his buttons. They started shooting snarky remarks at each other until their voices got higher and they were full of arguing. I exchanged looks with my mom, who looked upset, as she always did when Dad and Evan argued, which was often.
Why can't you be more like Levi?
Shouted my dad.
What's your problem with me?
Evan shouted back. My mom set her cup down roughly on the table, grabbing their attention. She looked annoyed too, but then she put on a sweet smile.
Evan, when is your next swimming competition, darling?
She asked. The atmosphere quickly changed. That was the one thing my parents didn't fight with Evan about. He's a fantastic swimmer. I was laying in bed later that evening when my parents came into my brother and I's room to say goodnight. My dad sat down next to Evan's bed and started asking him about his competition, which was in 2 days. They could talk about this for hours. Hey, Dad, I wanted to ask you about how you applied to college because I began, but I was interrupted by my dad saying,
I'll be right there, son. Give me a minute.
Then turning to talk to Evan again. I waited and waited for my dad to be done, but I eventually fell asleep waiting. This was normal. Their attention was always on me except for the days before Evan's competitions. I usually didn't care, but now I was flooded with college applications and I needed my parents for advice, now more than ever. The next day, I was getting tired of my parents giving me none of their time because they were so focused on Evan. I knew it wasn't his fault and that I'm old enough to know how to share, but I was getting annoyed at him. This is only because of your competition, you know. That's the only reason they don't fight with you right now, I said to him when we were both in our room.
You're jealous you're not their favorite son right now, aren't you?
He asked with a smirk. I wanted to punch his stupid face, which unfortunately was my face too. They'll forget about you after tomorrow, I snapped at Evan. He gave me a look of pure hatred. I had seen it before, usually when he fought with mom and dad, and I diffused the situation perfectly. He envied me, I could tell. I went to the bathroom to get ready for bed, then came back to find everything normal, except one tiny thing stood out. The clothes I had left on my desk chair were gone. They were dirty though, since I had worn them all day, so I figured mom took them to the laundry. I went to bed, not psyched for my brother's competition the next day. I was sitting in the damp bleachers of the pool next to my parents, who were both holding signs with my brother's name on them. Psh, what's 2 little signs compared to the dozens they've made for me throughout the years? The competition was supposed to begin 5 minutes ago, but nothing. Another 5 minutes passed and people were getting impatient. There was one swimmer missing, Evan's biggest rival. Suddenly we heard sirens and cops threw the doors open. I wondered who they were stalking towards, but soon enough they were forcing me to stand up and handcuffing me. They gave me the whole, "You have the right to remain silent" speech, but I barely heard it. I was nauseous. What the heck? What was I being arrested for? My parents looked like they had seen a ghost. My brother looked shocked, but slightly happy. I was just confused and honestly scared to death. They put me in an interrogation room where I waited for hours until a detective came in to talk to me. What's happening? What am I arrested for? I demanded to know, barely keeping my voice steady.
Where were you last night at 12:47, son?
The detective asked. I didn't like that he called me son. I told him I was at home sleeping at that time, and he shook his head. He told me it would be best for me to collaborate and tell the truth, which only confused me more. He took the laptop in front of him and turned it towards me. A video was playing security cam footage. I saw someone walk down a hotel hallway. Then I saw the guy standing in front of a door, and when it opened, the guy punched the man who opened the door straight in the face. The detective zoomed in on the assailant, and I recognized him. It was me, wearing the clothes I was wearing yesterday. It looked exactly like me. Was I tripping? Did I leave my house and knock some guy out?
Does that not look exactly like you, son?
Asked the detective. I nodded slightly. Who's the man in the hotel room? I asked.
You know very well who that is,
answered the detective. I took a closer look and my eyes widened. It was the missing swimmer. The missing swimmer had been found in his hotel room bathroom with a broken leg, unable to move. And according to security camera footage, it was me who attacked him. 4 hours later, my parents bailed me out. The swimmer was suing, so I'd have to go to court in a few days. I didn't do it, I swear. I was asleep at that time. I tried to explain, but they didn't believe me.
We raised you better than this, Levi. We never thought you'd be capable of such a monstrosity,
said my mom through tears. My dad hadn't spoken to me the entire car ride home. But those clothes, Mom, you took them to wash them much earlier that night, I responded.
I didn't take your clothes, Levi. Stop trying to make excuses. We saw that footage. Everybody did.
My mom sobbed. My head was spinning. How did I appear in that footage wearing clothes I had taken off much earlier? When we arrived home and I saw my brother, it clicked. The dangers of having an identical twin. Evan framed me. I was on trial for attacking a young athlete for apparently no reason, but the only thing I was thinking about was how my brother betrayed me in the worst way possible. It made perfect sense. He wanted me gone, and he wanted his competitor gone. Now I was going to prison, and the poor guy Evan attacked would likely never swim again. At least not nearly as well as before.
Levi Freeman, you are sentenced to life in prison for physically attacking the plaintiff and leaving him to suffer, which was an irredeemably inhumane act,
said the judge. She smacked her little hammer and my fate was sealed. I felt very little. I didn't feel sad or scared or weak. All I felt was anger. I had been in prison for a week when I made the decision to take matters into my own hands. The case was closed, meaning no one would even question that I had attacked Evan's competitor. I didn't deserve life in prison. I was innocent. I knew perfectly well that I was, though my case was definitely insane. My identical twin brother put on my clothes and framed me for leaving a fellow human being to suffer for hours. I had to escape somehow. I quickly realized you can't actually file bars until you squeeze out of your little window. Why do movies teach us all these stupid ways to break out of jail? I was put on kitchen duty for a few days, and that's when I got an idea. The next week, I asked to be put on garbage duty, which was always available since no one liked doing it, and the guards didn't want someone doing it wrong and leaving trash everywhere. I picked up trash all day and filled up multiple huge bags. It was disgusting, but I needed this. Later that day, I had to take the trash to the big garbage containers, and today was pickup day. You can probably guess what my great escape plan was at this point. I needed to be far from the prison before they noticed I was gone, so a little unpleasant ride surrounded by putrid garbage was ideal. The truck picked up the whole container with me in it and dumped it in the back. I was lucky the truck driver had to pee real quick, which allowed me to attack him and steal his clothes. A handsome and young guy like me didn't have any trouble at all getting a ride into town, which is where the next phase of my plan began. Doing the garden work was usually my job at home, so since I was gone, the grass, bushes, and trees were overgrown. Do you know what this was great for? You got it right, stalking. Every night I watched my family. I expected to see arguments, screaming matches, and slamming doors like always. So tell me why I saw smiling faces. I saw Evan doing a cool handshake with my dad and setting the table. I saw them talking all lively and laughing together. My brother replaced me. I was furious. I sat outside my bedroom window and watched my traitor of a brother living happily, a constant smile on his face. I had to take a deep breath to stop myself from storming in and hurting him, hurting the face that framed me. But it was too soon. I had things planned for Evan. Soon enough, he wasn't smiling anymore. He was scared. I would stalk him all the time. He saw a figure outside his window at night, but when he opened the window, it disappeared. He heard voices in the vents and heated tapping on his window. I watched as he lost sleep and got more shaken up by the day. I was even bold enough to shut down the power whenever he was home alone. I would always open doors that he knew he had closed, and close doors he knew he had opened. I left food out on the counter after he had put it in the fridge. I was evil enough to leave chips and crackers in his bed, so when he sat on it, they crumbled. My time finally came when my parents were out of town for the weekend. Evan was so on edge, he flinched at the light tap of a branch on his window. So imagine how he screamed when he saw me sitting on the kitchen island in the dark. I had a knife in my hand and slowly moved towards him, weeks of anger visible in my eyes. Evan staggered backwards, shaking. "No hug hello for your brother?" I asked him sheepishly.
How did you escape?
He demanded. I simply smirked at him. "You framed me," I said. Evan stumbled and fell to the floor against a wall. I kneeled down to his level and said, "You stole my life." Evan started explaining why he did it. He said he was tired of being the black sheep, of me being Mr. Perfect, of Mom and Dad hating him. I'm not Mr. Perfect anymore. Mom and Dad don't want to see me ever again, but they do want to see you. I grabbed Evan's chin and said, "Luckily, we share a face." That night was the last time I saw my twin brother, when he scurried out of the house and promised to never come back. I went and changed into his clothes. I finally slept like a baby. I knew Evan was too much of a coward to come back. I guess I should call him Levi now, because now I'm Evan. Not like my parents will be able to tell the difference. They're kind of terrible. I think what I did was just. My brother stole my life, so I stole his in return. The only obstacle I have now is how the heck am I going to convince my parents to let me quit swimming?
Odessa, Malcolm, there's someone here we would like you to meet.
I crawled out of my room and groaned. I had an assignment due, and all these interruptions were totally unacceptable. As soon as we arrived in the living room, Mom introduced the girl who was standing between her and Dad.
Meet Genesis, your new sister.
My jaw dropped. New sister?
Yes!
Malcolm squealed, like the annoying 10-year-old that he is.
An upgrade to Odessa. I shall call her Odessa 3.0.
Oh, and Odessa,
Mom looked at me.
we are going to need your room to put Genesis in. You will be moved to the attic.
Hi, my name is Odessa. If you are watching this video, it means that you are an amazing person. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. Smash that notification bell so you will get notified when more crazy stories like mine are uploaded. As I looked out of the attic window and watched my family hop into the car, with Genesis acting like the sister of Chucky, Malcolm overly annoying, and my parents acting as though I didn't exist unless they wanted me to fetch something for them, I couldn't help but feel relieved that they were going out and I would finally have some peace and quiet. I miss Grandma, I thought, as I dragged myself out of bed to attend to the long list of chores that Mom left for me to complete. A few days after Grandma's funeral, her lawyer called and asked to speak with me and my parents. While he was here, he told us that I was the sole heir to Grandma's estate. Mom laughed.
That dingy old house that she lived in? You could have called us on the phone with this news.
Unfazed by the interruption, the lawyer continued.
When Odessa reaches 18 years of age, she will receive her grandma's estate in the country that was left to her by her deceased husband, worth $3.5 million, as well as $5 million in cash and another $5 million in smaller assets. For the next 24 months, Odessa will also receive $2,000 via bank deposit, and Mr. and Mrs. Dill will continue to receive their $5,000 until Odessa's 18th birthday. Odessa, my secretary, will give you a call a few days before your 18th birthday so we can meet on that day and carry out the rest of the will.
As I mopped the kitchen floor, one thing nagged me about Grandma's will. Why didn't she leave anything to her daughter, my mom? Why me? Many things changed after we visited Grandma's lawyer. I had to stop all my extra activities at school. I was given a 4 p.m. curfew, and Mom took my bank card, so I didn't have access to the money Grandma's lawyer was sending me every month. Sometimes Mom gave me chores until my knuckles and hands were blistered and bleeding. I was no longer a part of the family. I now felt like nothing more than a maid. I groaned loudly when I heard the family car pull into the driveway. The kitchen door flew open.
Hey, Odessa! The movie was really good, and the pizza was even better!
Malcolm stomped all over the wet kitchen floor.
Odessa, when you're finished these chores, bring my bag from the car up to my room. I must retry everything I bought at the mall. Aren't Mom and Dad the best parents ever?
Genesis chuckled cruelly. Mom and Dad passed and pretended like I wasn't even there. 2 more years, Odessa. 2 more years, I mumbled under my breath as I re-mopped the kitchen floor. Early one Saturday morning, a few weeks after Grandma died, I told Mom I needed to go to the library to finish an assignment. She told me that as long as I finished all my chores and reached back by 4 p.m., I was allowed to go. I hurried my chores and grabbed my school bag and went on my way. I really wasn't going to the library. I was going to Grandma's house. Grandma gave me a spare key, and she told me to keep it our little secret. Upon reaching Grandma's porch, I noticed that the door was slightly opened. I picked up one of Grandma's concrete plant pots and walked inside slowly. I hid behind Grandma's sofa and saw a man moving from room to room. Why is he here? Maybe he's a thief. Nobody is going to steal anything from my Grandma. I jumped up and screamed with the plant pot raised in the air. Startled, the man stumbled backwards as I tackled him. We fought for a few seconds, and the plant pot fell from my hand. I pushed the man hard, and he fell backwards and hit his head on the corner of the table. Taking advantage of the fact that he was dazed, I grabbed the rope under Grandma's kitchen sink and tied him up with little resistance from him. I pulled my phone from my bag. I'm going to call the police. That will teach you for trying to steal from my Grandma,
I'm not a thief.
the man said slowly. I caught you in my grandmother's house lurking around, and you're saying you aren't a thief? Let me guess, you must be some sort of security? I laughed bitterly.
I know Charmaine. I'm not a thief. I'm a friend of hers.
You knew Grandma? The man looked at me confused. She passed away about 4 months ago. I untied the man. Sorry about attacking you.
Don't worry about it. You are feisty, just like your grandma.
How did you know my grandma?
Your grandma and I were actually high school sweethearts. I was a nerd and she was the most popular girl in school. We planned to get married right out of high school, but my family moved away and we lost touch. Your grandma was my first true love, and she was 99% of the time the reason why I got into trouble as a teenager.
He laughed heartily. Do you mind telling me some of your stories with Grandma?
I would love to.
The man introduced himself as Dwight Ambrose. We spoke for hours about all the things that he and Grandma did when they were teens. It was nice having someone to talk about Grandma, since my mom never spoke about her after she died. Dwight's stories brought Grandma's memories to life. It was nice getting to know the younger side of Grandma. I looked at my watch. 3:15 p.m. Dwight, do you mind if we meet again to talk about Grandma?
I would love to, but next time, let's meet somewhere we could eat. Talking makes me hungry.
Dwight chuckled as he rubbed his stomach playfully. That Saturday was the first of many Saturdays that Dwight and I shared together. The twinkle that Dwight got in his eyes when he spoke about Grandma melted my heart and comforted me knowing that my grandma's memory would live on. One Friday night, Genesis and some of her friends were having a sleepover. Mom told Genesis that whatever she wanted, she should ask me. And boy, did she ask. Genesis had me back and forth getting snacks and drinks for her and her friends. When I entered her room, Genesis and her friends were trying out new hairstyles. Genesis was curling her hair with a curling iron by the vanity. I placed a glass of juice in front of her, and someone bumped me from behind, causing the juice to spill all over her. In her rage, Genesis not only screamed at me, but pressed the hot curling iron into my wrist. Her friends laughed, and I cried as I pulled my hand away. I ran to the bathroom and turned on the tap as I allowed the water to cool my wrist. When I showed my parents what Genesis did, Mom said I probably deserved it. The next day, I didn't tell my parents when I left the house. I wore a long-sleeved t-shirt, even though it was hot out. T. Rosaria. I was flipping through the menu when he arrived.
Hey, how's my favorite 16-year-old doing?
We ordered and chatted for a bit.
Something wrong? You're usually quite the chatterbox.
I'm okay, just a lot on my mind today. Dwight nodded, but he continued to look at me suspiciously. After we ate, I offered to clear the pizza box and cups from the table. One of the cups still had a little juice, and it fell on the sleeve of my shirt. Without thinking, I pulled up the sleeve, revealing my ugly scar.
Odessa, who did that to your wrist? No. You leave those things there and tell me what's going on.
Reluctantly, I told him about what Genesis did the night before, and before I knew it, I was telling Dwight about everything that was happening at home. By the time I was done, my face was stained with tears, and my vision was blurred by the tears I was trying to hold back. Dwight called over one of the waitresses, a middle-aged woman, and asked her if she could take me to the washroom and help me wash up. When I got back to the booth, the table was cleared and Dwight was on the phone. I sat and waited patiently till he came off.
I was just on the phone with someone who is more than willing to help you out. She's just around the corner. She should be here in about 15 minutes. How about we get some ice cream while we wait?
I nodded. Dwight got up and purchased the ice cream. He kept the conversation light, not really expecting me to answer.
Hi, I see you're filling up on dessert before you have dinner again.
A female voice said. Dwight chuckled and stood up. He moved to the side and allowed the woman into the booth before he sat down.
Odessa, this is my wife, Sandra Ambrose.
She extended her hand and I shook it.
Dwight just told me about your dilemma. Would you mind telling it to me yourself?
Her voice was soft and caring. Sandra Ambrose was the head of the social services division in our county. After hearing my story, she asked me if I wanted to stay with my family or if I wanted to move. I told her that I wanted to move, but I didn't have anywhere to go. Dwight and Sandra looked at each other as though they were having a non-verbal conversation. After a few seconds, Dwight looked at me.
We would be happy to keep you until we find you a suitable home.
Dwight and I chatted as Sandra made a few calls. When she was finished, she looked at me.
Let's go and get your things.
By the time Dwight, Sandra, and I got to my parents' home, there was a police car outside. Sandra spoke with the officers, and we all walked to the front door. Sandra knocked on the door, and Mom opened it.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Still. My name is Sandra Ambrose. I am from Social Services. This is my husband, Dwight Ambrose, and these are officers Diaz and Raymond. I am here on behalf of Odessa, who has filed a report against your negligence and abuse against her. Because of her age, we don't need a court hearing to remove her from your home. Will you allow us to come in so she can retrieve her things?
Mom nodded and stayed silent. Dwight, Officer Diaz, and I went to my room to gather my stuff while Officer Raymond and Sandra spoke with Mom. Within 30 minutes, everything was bagged and taken to the car. I didn't look at any of my family members as I walked out of that house for the last time. Dwight and Sandra didn't have children of their own, so, in the end, they decided to adopt me. I moved schools so I wouldn't have to interact with Genesis. Living with Dwight and Sandra made me realize how much love I missed out on growing up with my parents. On my 18th birthday, I told Dwight and Sandra that I wanted to take them to lunch, but I needed to make one stop first. I visited Grandma's lawyer and was given a letter. Nothing in the world could have prepared me for the contents of the letter. The letter stated that my mother wasn't really my mother. She was my aunt. But that wasn't as mind-boggling as the other part of the letter that said Grandma wasn't my grandma. She was really my mother. A few years after my grandma's husband died, she rekindled the flames of her high school sweetheart. After about 3 months, he was called back on duty and he left. Grandma never told him that she was pregnant, even though they wrote to each other over the years. He had found love somewhere else and had gotten married after retiring from the service. After giving birth, she got heart complications and wasn't given long to live. She gave rights to her sister so I wouldn't end up in the foster system, and she ensured that she sent money every month to take care of her baby girl. Now that I was 18, it was only right that I found out who my real parents were. Just then, the secretary knocked on the door and asked the lawyer if he was ready for the next client. The lawyer nodded and stood up to welcome the client into the office.
Good day, Mr. Ambrose. Thank you for joining us.
The lawyer and Dwight shook hands before they sat. "What are you doing here?" I looked at Dwight, then the lawyer.
Well, that's what I'd like to know.
The lawyer told Dwight that his name was given as the father of Charmaine Tesla's daughter. "Do you mean to say that Dwight—" My voice trailed off. The lawyer nodded.
Mr. Ambrose, I would like to introduce to you Odessa Dill, your daughter. Now, if you would follow me, there is someone here to take your DNA to confirm that you are indeed daughter and father.
Dwight and I stood holding each other crying for at least 10 minutes before we followed the lawyer to the next room. At lunch, we told Sandra all about the events at the lawyer's office. We laughed, we cried, we held hands despite the queer looks people were giving us in the restaurant. Sure enough, when the results came in, it was confirmed that Dwight and I were father and daughter. I changed my last name to Ambrose, and Sandra and Dwight changed their own will and added me into it even though I begged them not to. There is a saying, life begins at 40, but my life began at 18 when my real mother gave me something more precious than money or anything money could buy. She gave me a new start with a new family. I know that she is watching over me. I finally have the life that I deserve. Mom, look at what I found outside in the bushes.
Juliet, my older sister, approached Mom holding a dog in her hands.
Can we keep it, please?
It was a small brown and white dog with a distinctive snowflake covering one eye. Mom sighed.
I'll discuss it with Dad when he gets home, but for now, please take the dog in the backyard. I will name the dog Max.
Juliet looked at me smugly as she headed to the backyard. Hi, my name is Max. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to hear more of our crazy stories. Oh yeah, hit that notification bell too. Juliet and I never got along. It seemed to me that she always had it out for me. The way Mom tells it is that Juliet always wanted a little sister, but when she got me, she wasn't very happy. When I was 5, Mom told us we could go play in the backyard. Juliet tied me to a tree and snuck up to her room. Rain fell, and I was sick for 2 weeks. At age 8, after watching some Daredevil stuff on TV, Juliet convinced me to bungee jump off the top bunk. She told me that the rope tied on my foot was the same ones they used on the TV. I trusted my sister and jumped. I fractured my cheekbone, and Juliet convinced Mom and Dad that it was all my doing. When I started junior high, Juliet pretended that we didn't know each other. Let's just say that when a sibling doesn't like you, things tend to get a bit crazy at home. The consequences of Juliet not liking me meant that my parents paid more attention to me than they did to her, and over the years, she became extremely jealous of it. When Dad came home, he told Juliet that she could keep the dog, but she had to take care of it, which meant using her own money from the weekend job that she had to buy it whatever it needed. Juliet was ecstatic.
Come on, Max. Let's play till dinner.
Dad looked at Mom in confusion. She shook her head and walked back to the kitchen to finish dinner. When Mom called us to dinner, Max was seated at the table in my chair. Move that mangy mutt from the table, Juliet.
He's not a mangy mutt.
She scratched behind Max's ears.
He's the new and improved Max.
She made baby noises at the dog. Juliet, get that dog out of here. A table is no place for a dog, Dad bellowed. The next night, I came home late from practice. Mom ordered pizza, and she told me that the remaining 4 slices were for me. I couldn't wait to sink my teeth into them. When I arrived home, the pizza box was gone. Mom, where's the pizza?
It's on the kitchen table.
Mom walked into the kitchen. When she realized it wasn't there, she called Juliet and questioned her.
I told you that the last 4 pieces were for Max. But I did give them to Max.
Juliet looked at me slyly.
Juliet, you gave the dog the pizza? I was talking about your brother, not the dog. Oops.
She placed her hand on her mouth and walked away. If that wasn't bad enough, a few days after that, Juliet let Max in my room and he destroyed some of my things. Pillows, shoes, books. It was a disaster. Juliet said that she needed to go to the bathroom and she locked Max in her room and he must have gotten out somehow. Dad told Juliet that the dog wasn't allowed in the house for 1 week, and if things continued like this, the dog would have to go. I'm usually not the mean younger brother, but sadly, things did continue because I made sure that they did. The next few days, I made sure that Max added a few more incidents to his list. I placed one of Dad's new shoes in the kennel. I also let Max inside and placed Mom's favorite vase in his way so it broke. I even got Max to chew on my new math textbook. By this time, Mom and Dad were furious. Juliet begged for one more chance to keep Max, and reluctantly, my parents agreed. Once alone, Juliet glared at me.
I know that you are behind everything.
I have no idea what you're talking about, I smiled politely.
Don't worry, you will pay for this.
Juliet stormed off, and I laughed hysterically. Over the next few days, things were pretty quiet. Juliet stayed out of my way, and I stayed out of hers. One morning, while on the way to school, I saw Juliet standing, staring at a tree. I walked up behind her. Hey, Juliet, is everything okay? Juliet jumped.
I'm fine.
She stuck something in her pocket and walked away. I didn't think anything of it since, well, Juliet is a girl, and sometimes girls act weird for no reason. Until I was walking home from school and realized why Juliet was acting the way that she did. On a lamp pole was a poster of a lost dog. A dog that looked just like Max with a collar. Would Juliet really? My voice trailed off. That afternoon, Juliet had band practice, so it gave me enough time to search her room. I really didn't expect to find the collar, thinking that she would have thrown away any evidence, but there it was. The collar was hidden in her jewelry box. I took pictures of it, made sure that Juliet's room was just how I found it, and went to my room. I can't believe Juliet stole that dog, I thought to myself as I tossed a ball into the air and caught it mindlessly. I had 2 choices. I could either tell Mom and Dad or make Juliet pay for every rotten thing she had ever done to me over the years. I smiled at the thought. After dinner that night, Mom called me to wash the dishes. I told her that Juliet said she would wash them for me since I helped her ace her science test. Juliet protested.
The both of you better figure this out. I'm heading to bed. Good night.
I called Juliet and showed her the picture of the dog collar. I know what you did, so from now on, you do what I say when I say it. Got it? Juliet nodded and headed to the kitchen while I returned to my bedroom to think about other things that I could get Juliet to do for me. It felt good to finally be able to control my sister after all these years. The next few days that followed made me question why I didn't think about a stunt like this sooner. I got my sister to put on my shoes every morning, make me breakfast, carry my books, and even do my homework. One lunchtime, I even got her to juggle apples for the entire cafeteria. Every time she threatened not to do something I asked, I told her that I would post everything on social media, and maybe the family of the stolen dog may or may not press charges, but maybe she would like to find out. Spending more time around Juliet also meant spending more time with her friends. One thing I did not cater for was the feelings I got for one of Juliet's friends, Sandy. I had never felt this way about anyone before. The way she smiled, giggled, and walked mesmerized me. She was on my mind morning, noon, and night. I needed to get to know her. One afternoon, while doing my homework, I asked Juliet if Sandy was seeing anyone. She tilted her head and looked at me confused.
Please don't tell me that you...
Before she finished, she burst out laughing.
You and Sandy? You do realize that she is older than you, right?
And I have a sister who can make it happen. Let's not forget that. The smile was immediately wiped from Juliet's face.
You can't be serious. Wanting to punish me? Fine. But to bring my friend into this is even too low for you, Max.
Juliet got up and walked out of my room. I decided then and there to stop treating Juliet as a slave. After all, she was my sister. We may not always see eye to eye, but we should at least be able to get along. The next day, while at school, Juliet and Sandy approached me. Sandy looked at me, and I felt as though my heart melted.
Hi.
Hi.
Juliet said that you wanted to get to know me? Is that true?
I looked at Juliet, then back at Sandy. That's true.
I'll pick you up at 8 p.m.
Sandy smiled. She and Juliet walked away. I couldn't believe that I actually had a date with Sandy. The day dragged on. I thought that the last bell would never ring. I hustled home and prepared for my date. I couldn't believe how nervous I was when I finally heard her car horn and Juliet yelled that Sandy was here. I grabbed my jacket and mouthed thank you to Juliet before I headed out to the car to meet my date. Sandy suggested that we go to the local pizzeria to grab a bite. Don't you want to go somewhere more sophisticated?
I'm a very simple girl. The pizzeria is fine.
She smiled at me. After the pizzeria, we went to see a movie and we got some ice cream. Sandy and I hit it off really well. When she dropped me off, she insisted that she walk me to the front door. She thanked me for a great evening. Then she placed her hands on my waist and pulled me in for a kiss. She pulled away slowly and walked towards her car. I waited until she got in and drove away before entering the house. Nothing could ruin this night, not even Juliet. It was the best date I had in a long time. I got to my room and removed my jacket, and something fell out. I picked it up slowly and looked at it. It was a necklace, a very expensive necklace, adorned with precious stones. Where did this come from? I'll figure it out tomorrow. There must be some mistake. The next morning, I saw my parents watching the news as I was headed to the kitchen. A picture from the television caught my eye. It was the same necklace that was in my jacket. I walked calmly to my room to get a better look at it.
Got ya! Now who's going to go to jail?
Juliet smirked. What are you talking about? I don't even know how this got into my jacket pocket.
Who cares? I don't. This information is too good for blackmail. Go to jail. Go directly to jail. Do not collect $200.
Juliet cackled and walked out of my room. I followed angrily and barged into her room. Do you know anything about this?
I don't have to tell you anything. What I do know is you are in possession of a stolen item.
I walked towards her and grabbed her arm. Tell me what you know. Juliet pulled her arm away and laughed.
You really think that Sandy would go out with a dweeb like you? Her father owns the largest jewelry store in the country. She planted the necklace on you. You started the game, and I'm finishing it.
Juliet and I spun towards the direction of her door. Standing there was Mom and Dad, hands folded across their chest, and anger plastered on their faces.
What is going on here?
Juliet's eyes darted between Mom's and Dad's face.
Mom.
Mom walked towards me and snatched the necklace from my hand.
Somebody had better start talking before I call the police to take you both away.
I had never seen Mom or Dad this angry before. Juliet and I both started talking together to give our side of the story. One at a time, Dad said impatiently. Mom and Dad listened without saying a word as we both told our sides of the story. When we were finished, we were instructed to stay in our rooms until we were told to come out. The worst feeling you can have is waiting for your parents to decide your punishment. After about 2 hours, Mom and Dad told Juliet and I to pack up our clothes and to meet them in the sitting room. Juliet and I protested, but Mom and Dad weren't having it. When we got to the living room, there was a strange man and a woman standing there.
Juliet, Max, this is Mr. and Mrs. Singh. They run a home for troubled youth. They are here to take you to your new home. Your dad and I have tried everything over the years to get you two to at least tolerate each other, but nothing worked. Maybe Mr. and Mrs. Singh can teach you something your father and I couldn't.
Juliet and I begged and pleaded to stay. We promised to be better, but our parents turned their backs on us, and Mr. and Mrs. Singh dragged us to the car and drove off. When we got to the home, Sandy was also there. She and Juliet hugged each other. She walked over to me and apologized for everything that she did. I accepted her apology. I then apologized to Juliet, and she apologized to me. We realized that we did take things too far, and we both could have ended up in jail, or worse, because we couldn't get along. Juliet and I made a pact that day to try and be friends. A week later, Juliet, Sandy, and I were called to a room. In the room was Mom, Dad, Sandy's parents, and another man they didn't know. How are you kids holding up? Dad raised his eyebrows at us. We're doing okay. Dad introduced Juliet and I to the strange man in the room, Mr. Decker. He was Max's owner. Max's real name was Pluto. Juliet apologized for stealing the dog, and she said that she was sorry for any grief caused to the family. Mr. Decker accepted Juliet's apology, thanked our parents, and left.
Have you all learned your lesson? It takes one wrong prank to land someone in jail.
Mom looked at the three of us. We apologized to our parents and promised them that we would do better.
Good. Now get your things and let's go home.
Later, at home, Mom and Dad told us that Mr. and Mrs. Singh were dear friends of theirs and nothing was written on their record. When Sandy's dad heard about what happened, they all decided that this was the best avenue to take to teach us a lesson. Juliet and I still do what siblings do, get on each other's throats, but we did learn that families should be there for each other and not against each other.